Thank you so much. So that should be. Let's see.
And I'll probably just stand most of the time anyway. So
Say that again.
I'll probably stand most of the time.
Okay, excellent. Here
Okay.
you go, and this is our
I
moderator. I think the moderator will probably kick us off and then bring you in. He was saying you'd prefer to stand, and then obviously the speakers can choose whether they'd prefer to speak from here or from the lectern.
Do you want to present the European Investment Bank first and then I can step in?
No, you go for it. I think it's completely fine if you just take the whole,
Okay.
if you're happy with that.
Yeah.
Or would you prefer me to?
Yeah, originally I thought it was coming in after setting the scene of the scene of your bank and then just getting into.
So would you like me to just introduce the EIB first
Yes,
to
I think
open
so.
open the
Yes,
remarks?
that'd be
Okay, let me do that.
easier.
Okay, excellent. And if you find it easier to have some headphones, I'll give you some. Or you have them there? Do you have? You have them. Okay, excellent. Does this work? It works. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for our excellent event today. To welcome very first you to our event on fortifying our future, protecting critical infrastructure from global warming. We have a wonderful set of panelists, and our moderator will soon introduce you to all of them. But very first up, I'd like to introduce EIB's Vice President Ambroise Fayol to provide some opening remarks. Please.
Thank you very much, Elina, and many thanks to you for joining us for this panel. I know it is late and it is Friday, so the topic is really, really important. So I'll just make a few remarks. Today we are going to discuss strategies and best practices that will enhance the resilience of our vital systems against the ever increasing aspects of global warming. We see that with hurricanes, floods, heat waves, wildfire, these events can cause significant damage to critical infrastructures, disrupting power grids, destroy our forests, etc. I mean, we've had a terrible example in Spain a few weeks ago with disaster that also resulted in over 200 deaths. It was just one of the last sobering episodes of how global warming is posing significant threats to the critical infrastructure. So enhancing the resilience of this system is not just a necessity, it is an urgent imperative. It's also an economic imperative. When you look at the assessment of the European Environment Agency, only in Europe, their estimation is that, that was published this year, is that economic losses from weather and climate-related extreme of assets they assess that at 738 billion euros during the period 1980-2023, but it includes 162 billion between 2021 and 2023. In other words, almost a fourth of the losses have been concentrated in the last 3 years. Indeed, the urgency of this issue is driven by the accelerating pace of climate change and its increasingly visible impact. We are not sufficiently prepared. This is why proactive measures are necessary to prevent catastrophic failures and ensure the continuity of essential services. And actually, we know that this is good investment. Our assessment is that every euro invested in prevention and resilience saves between 5 and 7 euros in repairing damage. So we need to increase our financing for resilience. And at EIB we do that. Last year we devoted a record level of 2.7 billion euros to adaptation projects globally. We aim to do even more this year and in the years to come. And let me give you 2 examples outside of Europe, actually. The first one is in Barbados. We are supporting investments to help deal with floods and hurricanes. One project in partnership with the the Inter-American Development Bank and with the support of the European Union will improve sewage treatment and groundwater well management. And we are also supporting a system to recycle wastewater and wastewater for agriculture. To enable these investments, we are funding a debt for climate conversion program that responds to Barbados' particular financial needs in the bond market and also to the lack of fiscal space in the country. And the second example is in Kiribati in the Pacific, where most of the population live on island that we fear is going to be underwater in 50 years. And there is a port especially in it. So we are making a technical study, financed also with the support of the European Commission, to check whether it is possible to move the port in another island that would then be able to receive the population as well. I mean, these kind of examples are terrible, but this is the world we live in. Let me finish by, and I think investments can help there. That's the positive message that we need to have. Two final considerations. First, social considerations need to figure prominently in climate adaptation projects. This is because lower income and vulnerable citizens tend to be at greater risk, as they are both more likely to live in vulnerable locations and less able to relocate. And second, technology. Technology can also play a pivotal role in enhancing the resilience of this infrastructure. Advancing monitoring system, predictive analytics, smart grids enable us to anticipate and respond to this more effectively. So we need also to invest in technologies. I'll stop there. This is a great panel. Many thanks for coming, and I leave you in your safe hands. Thank you.
Good evening. We'll try to keep today's session relatively short because everyone knows it's Friday, TGIF and things like that. So I'll just briefly set the scene that climatic extremes, we are all aware of increasing floods, droughts, storm events, increasing around the world. Developing countries, developed countries are all in the same boat at the moment. And there's a need for investing in and increasing the resilience of critical infrastructure. However, that is not a zero-sum activity. We need investments, but we also need to create economic growth at the same time. So from investing in climate resilience, we can create new green jobs and new technologies. So today's panel will be divided into two parts. Part A will be the strategies and challenges in building a resilient infrastructure. And then the second part will be mobilizing collaboration and innovation for resilient infrastructure investments. So for time's sake, I'll just have everyone briefly introduce themselves on the panel, rather than myself going through. So I'll just quickly pass over.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is José Luis Blasco. I am Chief and Sustainability Officer at Acciona. Acciona is a solutions provider in infrastructure. We have around 14 gigawatts of renewable energy, and we provide infrastructure services around sustainability, of development of on cities and water and waste, etc., in 60 countries.
Many thanks. Carla Montesi from European Commission. I am working in the DG that is called the International Partnership. I am in the Directorate in charge of Green Deal and the Digital Agenda.
Elena Reuner representing the European Investment Bank in this panel. I'm the Deputy Director of the bank's Operations Directorate, or the Banking Directorate, if you will, responsible for the bank's activities in the European Union. And I have the bank's climate office in my remit, the center of expertise in the front line, championing climate finance and transforming the bank to the climate bank.
Hi, I'm Constance Chalcha. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for BNP Paribas Corporate and Investment Banking. I'm also very involved on the markets activity. And so we are a leader in green and sustainable bonds. We are the Bank of Acciona. We work very closely with the IB on many large program financing, and adaptation has been core in the past few years, really mobilizing countries as well as corporate.
Thank you very much. And briefly about myself, my name is Robert C. Breers. I'm founder of Our Future Water, which focuses on sustainable water management, author of a few books, including Financing Water Security and Green Growth with Oxford University Press, and editor-in-chief of Climate Resilient Societies with Springer Nature. Getting straight into it, EIB. How can public sector banks like EIB support governments in enhancing resilient infrastructure? Straight to the point.
Straight to the point, Robert, yes. Let me start by where our Vice President left it and say a few words about our adaptation ambition. So when we draw up our Climate Bank roadmap and started implementing, we recognized that we have been the mitigation bank rather than the adaptation bank. And in that occasion, we draw ourselves an ambitious adaptation plan, setting ourselves also quantitative KPIs for adaptation financing. And when we embarked in implementing the strategy, we realized that before we can actually address and contribute to accelerating and catalyzing the adaptation financing, we need to set the foundations. And what we have been doing is three things. Internally first, we have been enhancing our own capacities to identify adaptation relevant investments and enhancing our risk assessment framework to include adaptation and resilience as part of that. Secondly, we have been mainstreaming, if you will, adaptation as part of our project origination work. So adaptation is something we always are looking for when we are assessing our investments. And then thirdly, capacity building, upskilling not only our technical experts but also the bankers to have meaningful conversations about adaptation and resilience and preparedness when they talk to the clients. And then building on that, how can we then support our counterparts, governments, sub-sovereigns, but also our corporate clients in adaptation? Financing clearly is one of the key obstacles. It's availability of financing, it's accessibility of financing, and affordability of financing. And we are trying to address all these three A's, as I name them, by providing more, but also working closely with relevant counterparts to ease their access to finance. And as far as affordability is concerned, and improving that business case for adaptation that we believe that is still sometimes difficult to justify. We are working closely with our partners, including the European Commission, on developing new instruments, blended financing solutions, but also innovative ways to share that risk that is still perceived high when we talk about adaptation. So while financing is key, I would also mention a second leg. It's capacity building. Building those investable investment plans with our partners, including governments and sovereign entities, cities, regions. So again, there we are working really closely with our partners. The European Commission notably have put together technical assistance as well as advisory service proposition called ADAPT that bundles all those resources available midstream, upstream and downstream to help our partners indeed to develop and implement those investable adaptation plans. So how can EIB help? In summary, it is addressing the three A's: availability to financing, accessibility, as well as affordability, bridging the gap between public and private, bringing public sector and private sector together, and at the same time helping to build capacities at the promoter level, but also upstream to actually build those and construct those investable adaptation plans. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alina. It's very important to understand that adaptation is almost like the lost child of climate change. We're all focusing on mitigation. Hardly any investment is going to adaptation itself. So it's very important to focus that it's not just mitigation, it's adaptation as well. And we're struggling to get anywhere near 50%. It might only be 10, 20% if we're lucky. So it's very important to have these conversations, which then brings to Raphael, on why is it that climate financing is such a challenge? We're so focused on mitigation. That's the biggest thing, that's the most exciting thing. And adaptation is almost just...
Yeah. I think that two things. For the corporate perspective, adaptation is completely different from mitigation in terms of competence. And let me emphasize about the adaptation side. If you are suffering as an industry some challenges on mitigation, it's your industry who is suffering per jurisdiction. In terms, real term for a company, zero risk, because you are moving with your competence. But when you are talking about adaptation, you are unique, because you have your wineries in one place, you have your hotels in the coast of a specific place, you have your supply chain in a specific place. It's very customized risk approach. But the risk from the perspective of infrastructure is that we have problems to find the revenue streams, because there are a lot of capital and a lot of needs. But the connection between the needs and the capital is very weak, and there are only few operators capable to gain this kind of to tackle this kind of risk with a proper business model. I can give you two examples, because we are talking about also always about challenges, but two examples that it works. Okay, the first is that in North Dakota, in the U.S., in a city called Fargo, it's very close to the Minnesota border. They have the problem that every 2-3 years they become flood, completely flood. The worst floods in the last 10 years occur the 8 of 10 worst flood were in the last 10 years. This is worsen and worsen. Okay, we are building a diversion channel of 50 kilometers, and you know how it's paid. It's per day that they are not flood. It's a concession PPP, very innovative, and they are paying us per day they are not flood. It's a very interesting. And the second example that is very interesting also is in the other part of the world, in Casablanca, is the largest desalination plant in Casablanca, 40 kilometers in the south of Casablanca, and is providing desalinated water completely powered by renewable energy. But the magic is cheaper than the surface water that they are gaining. Is now 0.4 euros per cubic meter. And this is really, we call it power to avocado. This is a translation into wealth in the people. I think that we need to work on the business model, because the revenues is a question that you need to look for. And sometimes we are kidnapped about the traditional approaches, mainly from mitigation, that are not working for the adaptation. It's a lot of innovation there.
Thank you, Jose Luis. It's interesting that there's so many barriers to climate adaptation financing. Adaptation, there's technological, there's innovative problems, there's challenges in the mindset, there's political problems, regulatory problems, a shopping list of problems, basically. So I'll go straight to Carla, part of the European Commission policy making. So how can we get adaptation become mainstream, basically? How can we scale it up so it's 50-50 with mitigation, that we're standing at COP30 next year, 50% of funding's going to mitigation and the rest is going to adaptation, not like a little poor, long-lost, insignificant player?
No, you're absolutely right. But I take this opportunity to remind you push me to do that, to remind how at the level of European Union, it's our intervention, our climate finance is very, very important, because when we look to the number in 2023, we use 28.6 billion for climate finance, and exactly what you say, at least a little more than 50% was dedicated to adaptation and the other to mitigation. So but it's absolutely true that when we deal with adaptation, it's the most difficult part. And if I say, when we are working with our partner countries, when we work on adaptation, we are really looking to a complexity of different elements of the puzzle. One, of course, is working on infrastructure. And with our Global Gateway, we are now putting really the focus on investment in crucial infrastructure. When we talk about infrastructure, it's of course infrastructure also in the port, transport in the roads, transport in the building, resilience in urban cities, resilience on the coast. So it's a multi-layer work on key infrastructure. And I think here we are a key partner, as shown, where we really are working together in some key infrastructure, just to ensuring and to mainstreaming the adaptation. It's very, very important when we are building an investment, and we are working a lot with the European Investment Bank, with all the other development bank in Europe. When we are looking to the investment, we need to mainstreaming the adaptation element from the beginning of the investment. And so this part of mainstreaming is really very, very important. But behind the infrastructure resilience, we look to the adaptation also on what you mentioned, a early warning system, for example. So how we can put in place the anticipatory action, or where we can use all our innovation and scientific approach in order to ensure that we can anticipate inundation, drought, or at least reduce the impact of this disease that will happen. The third element that we are also, on which we are also working, also here in COP, is all the element on the insurance. Talking about risk, talking about insurance, we are building, for example, we are supporting African with the risk, African capacity, RSC, where we're working with them on putting in place some insurance system that will allow them to work or on the anticipatory action or in the answer when an accident appears. And also there, it's from facilitating the risk investment, and I think I cannot say more than what the EIB already said, and the other side continue to build capacity in our partner countries in the way that adaptation, all the key elements of adaptation are very well also introduced in the strategic plan, in the national determined contribution, in everything that it's planned to be a long-term action.
And it's very important to understand that resilience is about forward planning, forward thinking. It's not about reacting to climate change. It's about actually preempting the future. So if we can develop a capacity building, we can develop green jobs, green technologies, we spur economic growth, but we're enhancing our resilience to future extremes. So we're not on the back foot when we're facing climate change. We're on the front foot moving forwards. So thank you very much for your answer. Constance, you're at BNP Paribas. So from the private sector, how can commercial banks help finance resilient infrastructure?
So I'm going to first echo what you're saying, because I'm sorry, it's going to be a lot of repetition. First, for a commercial bank today, physical risk is a financial risk, but it requires a lot of analysis. So the first step for us is really spend a lot of time assessing. Where it gets tricky is that we need to take into account not only the value at risk, but the residual value at risk. So taking into account insurances. And that's where having schemes on insurance that are maybe more stable, longer term, having a visibility on the insurability of an asset over 10 years would help. Because today, every year, we need to reperform the assessment. The insurance policy might have changed. The cost might have increased. what is covered might have disappeared. So it's a very heavy process. Now, what we can do, we've been engaging a lot with clients, and just putting it on the table, making sure it's really top of mind, has been something extremely fruitful, which has triggered discussion on adaptation finance. So that's the first step. Now we don't want to leave it there. We do believe that today adaptation cannot be the second-class citizen of green. Investment in water cannot be, the blue cannot be a second-class citizen of green either. So we need to create a market segment for it to really channel capital towards adaptation. If adaptation or blue remain as part of a use of proceeds of a green bond, it may not get the attention or the capital required to go at scale to do what is needed. So we've been very active trying to promote adaptation bonds, resilient bonds, blue bonds. A couple of months ago, we issued a blue bond for a corporate SOAR, which is a water utility. We were very proud of it because we believe there's a segment, and it also addresses investors' appetite. Every year, we measure investors' appetite for thematics. 4 years ago, water, which is one of the prime topic when it comes to adaptation, was nowhere. This year, every year it's been growing. This year, it was the number 2 theme immediately after energy transition. So by questioning investors and really creating market segments, we believe we can do it. We also value extremely well what has been done by Sean Kidney through CBI, the resilient framework. I think it brings a proposition to bond markets to really start putting resilience as a hot topic. And what you were discussing about outcome bond is also a solution for specific configuration countries where it's not necessarily something at scale for a benchmark issuance, but they still deserve adaptation. So it's a wide range of things, but it starts with assessment and engagement.
Thank you very much for that. It's very. We often think that education and awareness is part of a public sector's responsibility, but we often forget the private sector also plays a role in education and awareness, whether it's investors down to the consumers. And over time, that demand will naturally increase. Over time, maybe your little children, customers of BNP Paribas will one day want to become investors. So it's all about educating the future generation and making this mainstream. It should be normal for us to be investing in adaptation. It should be normal for myself to be investing in something small, even if it's only a few, whatever. But it should become a normal. So hopefully one day they'll become a standard, just standard for clients. So we'll move to round 2, which is actually really nicely followed with Elena about how can private sector banks collaborate with EIB to promote resilient infrastructure.
Thank you. I usually always talk about 3 things, but I'm allowing today to talk about 4 things, actually. So first, so how can EIB actually catalyze, and how are we trying to catalyze adaptation investment, working with our partners? The first point, we try to mind our language. And what I mean by that, in what you also mentioned, and Carla, we are very much focusing on I think, on cost avoidance, and kind of the negative narrative. And when we talk to our clients, and also looping back what you said about risk assessment, it's not about cost avoidance, it's about revenue retention. And that goes for private sector as well as for the public sector in the larger socioeconomic sense. So really, when we have conversations with our customers, be it on the public or private sector, it's about turning the negative narrative to the positive one. Secondly, of course, we are deploying our whole financing kit for the purpose of catalyzing adaptation investment and improving that business case for adaptation. And there we go from financing PPPs, for example, very interesting project, flood protection project in a PPP form in Netherlands, where EIB was catalyzing investment, to us financing and collaborating with public sector. In Lisbon, drainage system, we financed that one. Another quite interesting example in the private sector, supporting RDI in drought-resistant seed development. We have also financed through our venture debt product, that is on sort of on the other end of the risk spectrum, development of technologies relevant for data in terms of climate adaptation. So really the whole spectrum of our financing toolkit is deployed. We are also looking into developing new products, innovative ways of addressing the climate adaptation challenge. Blue bonds were mentioned. We are also venturing and trying to catalyze capital markets to join in, because the challenge is too big for public finance to bridge the gap. We really have to mobilize all private sector investors and redirect funding for adaptation. So, and funds are important. We have invested, for example, in a fund called TURF, focusing to the resilience financing outside the union, as well as a fund called CRAFT, technology transfer fund. So again, crowding in other types of financiers in support of adaptation. Then I mentioned technical assistance, capacity building. I'm not going to dwell into that theme anymore, but just to flag again the ADAPT platform. That is a way of really making capacity building tools accessible to the relevant promoters. And finally, I would say we are catalyzing and aiming to catalyze adaptation through partnerships. Really important for us. And I hear example, our collaboration with the EU's mission on adaptation, as well as EU mission on cities, where EIB, together with the Commission, is reaching out to the promoters, finding, helping to build pipelines for adaptation investments, and finding jointly solutions for the financing challenge. And I stop there.
Thank you so much. It's important. We're too often influenced by the media to see climate change as a glass half empty, but it's really nice to hear very positive glass half full solutions and innovative financing mechanisms to really scale up this challenge that we're facing. And of course, the private sector needs to step up, because the public sector is limited with taxations, etc. So even in the water side of things, like climate requires trillions of dollars, but just to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 6 alone is almost $1 or $2, $3 trillion. So that's only water, but we're not talking about biodiversity or forestry or anything else here. So we have a massive, massive challenge ahead of us. So I'll naturally go to Jose Luis about, it's a private sector. What are the gaps in accessing finance? How can public-private partnerships enhance resilience?
Yeah, I think you all has emphasized that we are building today. Today we are building the infrastructure we will enjoy in 2050 and 2100. I think that this is very clear. This is not a question of the future, it's now that we are building this infrastructure. I think that we have very easy things. For example, most of the infrastructure is promoted by the public sector. Please include these requirements into the tendering process. It's very easy. It's only a line you need to put into this, and you can offer the basics of this infrastructure to build to last. But imagine that this kind of infrastructure that we are building, for example, we are offering a multi-purpose infrastructure. That is how this infrastructure can have another purpose, why this road cannot capture the water in order to irrigate the country, how we cannot produce energy for solar panels because we don't need to equip another places, how now we are building bridges that can clean the river because you have a lot of resources. There are a lot of infrastructure that is only one use because the engineers are only focused on one purpose. If you introduce these adaptation features into the tendering process, is mostly very cheap. The second, this is I think that you mentioned, and Global Gateway is also is the role of insurance in all of this. I think that we think that we are exploring how insurance-linked securities can play a role on this. You know how the cat bonds are working, is rocking. Now cat bonds are 40 billion. Not only in this year, we saw 75 different cat bonds in different parts of the world. Mostly is true in the US, but now the World Bank is also issuing in Chile a big bond. If you have infrastructure, loss and damage structure in order to finance when you are having this kind of events, you have an opportunity to prevent with a good infrastructure. But I can give you a final example. You know that the Spaniards have suffered Valencia floods, okay? Yes. It's very important to think about the figures when we are talking about what is the savings that we are having with this kind of infrastructure that we are investing now. The Spanish government is investing 14 billion to cover the damages of these floods. I think that if you are talking about Ambrose said that every single euro that you are investing in resilience and adaptation, you are saving 6 or 7. This is a real case study that investing in because next year, after 14 billion of investment, the risk will be exactly the same. I think that we need to think twice how the insurance policies, how these damages funds are playing also a role in order to prevent, and how infrastructure could be part of the solution. I think that there's a lot of innovation. But we have also another way to fund this kind of resilience. That is how we can embrace biodiversity and nature as a part of the solution. Infrastructure related to the nature-based solutions is a new field to explore because the buffer that the nature is making for this kind of events, mostly extreme, is huge important. And I think that is the new policy of the European Union tackling how the nature could play a role and biodiversity can play a role is another innovative field that to explore in terms of infrastructure and resilience.
And it's really important. I'm actually glad to hear nature-based solutions because I am an author of several books on nature-based solutions. But I come from the science side, trying to raise awareness and education to scientists on what financial tools are available. And it's really, and then coming from that side of the coin, there's very limited knowledge on what tools, what financing mechanisms are actually available. Private payments for ecosystem services, for example, is very limited. Scientists are taught science at university, they go into scientific roles, they don't encounter economics and finance much. So it was really exciting today to be part of the finance side of the coin, but coming from the science part. So I'm pleased to hear that. So Carla, to finish off, for least developed, there's a two-part question. So for least developed countries, how can governments prioritize resilience investments despite their limited budgets? And what role can international aid play? And then I'd just also like to touch on the blue economy, this sargassum algae, which is really important. The blue economy is often forgotten. It's actually one of the largest economies in the world is the ocean, but we're trashing it basically, to be blunt here. So I'll pass it over to you as the final panelist for today.
Okay, very mixed question, but on the first one, the framework. I think we all say a little the same, that what is important that is we integrate this component of adaptation in everything that we do, starting from the political side, from the programmatic side, from the planning side, to the different financial tools. let me take an example of cities. I think some of us mentioned the cities. We are working at the cities level. So it's important that we work at national level, but our intention in the international partnership is also working to cities level. We are working at the level of urban. Urban planning, it's key element in order to ensure adaptation. So when we look to urban planning, for example, we started with capacity building at level of the municipality, at level of the town, just to increase their awareness that we need to start by the planning elements in order to assure and to integrate the to mainstreaming adaptation. And after we are coming today, how a municipality, how a secondary cities can use some financial tools that are putting available. And in our package of the financial tools, we are also foreseeing guarantees that will allow cities to ask for some guarantees in order to de-risk intervention also from the private sector. So planning integration into the strategy of the countries will be the first element. And after moving to the financial tools. Now, I know very well that it's very difficult. You just mentioned to have a overview of the financial tools that exist, but I think this will require a strong analysis with each development bank to understand very well the different financial tools that are available. Second question that you were asking is a completely different question, but is how today we can have a natural disaster that is appearing that we can really see, and how we can transform into an economic benefit. And you mentioned Sargassum, so let me take this example, but we can take many other examples. But it's clear when we look to the Sargassum, the development of the Sargassum in all the critical region, it's very scaring, and it is threatening the life of the communities, the life of the coast cities, the coast population, and etc. So it's a really threatening. Now, what we are doing together at the moment is seeing how we can transform this threatening into an economic opportunity. There is the way to work with the private sector in order that the private sector can identify an element, an utility using the Sargassum to transform in one other commodities. Could be a medical, a pharmaceutical one, could be a fertilizer one, could be any other utility, any other commodities where we are able to use these elements that is linked to the climate change. It's a clear disaster to see how we can use this element in transforming into an economic activities. This will not happen from today to now. This will require research, this will require innovation, this is require also the involvement of the private sector. So when we look to the Sargassum, for example, we are starting from this. We are starting from working with researchers to see what is really possible. We are now putting in place a working group and the dialogue with the private sector to understand better how we can involve the private sector from the beginning of the design of the action in order to see have we today the possibility to finance some or facilitate some financial action that will transform this threatening into an economic opportunity. But we can talk hours about the Sargassum.
Thank you so much. For the takeaways of today, I believe is that public-private partnerships is key. We need to keep finding ways to work to close that gap in the financing. Glass is half full for climate adaptation, and also nature-based solutions is key, is critical. We've got to restore our ecosystem services because ecosystem services keep us alive at the end of the day. No clean air, no clean water, we're finished. And then final one is that we can see that there's challenges at both the nation-state level of development financing, and then we can see that downwards we need financing for our cities because we are an urban species and we're urbanizing extremely fast. So we have to think about how can we have developed climate adaptation across our borders, but also inside our own countries. We have administration borders and different administration levels, and that's a massive challenge. But it's really important to hear the European Commission talking about acknowledging that cities is one of the main areas for the future for adaptation as well. So I'd like to wrap up here. It's Friday, and safe travels. And my own panel, sorry if I may promote next week, is Wednesday, 2 p.m. I'm doing urban water security, moderating and organising a panel in the Danish pavilion. The Green Climate Fund is there, European Investment Bank is there, and several others. And then followed by is nature-based solutions from a city perspective. And I'm like a floor interventionist. UNEP, United Nations Environmental Protection, is running that panel. I'm just on it as a co-moderator. So next Wednesday, if you are around in Baku, I'd love to see you all. Thank you.